July 31, 2022. A car speeds down a road in Ohio at nearly 100 miles per hour. Seconds later, it crashed into a building with devastating force. Two teenagers lose their lives. One survives. What initially appears to be a terrible accident soon becomes the center of a murder investigation. Prosecutors claim the crash was intentional. The defense insists it was a tragic accident. And at the center of it all is one question. Was this a crash, or was it murder? July 31st, 2022. A quiet morning in Strongsville, Ohio. The roads are calm. Businesses are closed. And most people are still asleep. But in just a few moments, a speeding car will tear through the silence and become the center of one of the most controversial criminal cases in recent American history. A 2018 Toyota Camry races down the road at nearly 100 miles per hour. Seconds later, it slams into a commercial building with devastating force. Inside the vehicle are three teenagers, Mackenzie Shirilla, Dominic Russo, and Davion Flanagan. Dominic and Davion would not survive. Mackenzie would. What first appeared to be a tragic accident soon became something much darker. Prosecutors claimed the crash was intentional. The defense argued it was a devastating mistake. And the question that divided the public was simple. Was this an accident or murder? Before the headlines and courtroom battles, there were three young people with their futures ahead of them. Mackenzie Shirilla was a teenager from Ohio. Like many young people her age, she spent time with friends, attended school, and was navigating the challenges of adolescence. Dominic Russo was 20 years old. Friends described him as outgoing and energetic. Davion Flanagan was 19. He was known for his loyalty to friends and his easygoing personality. The three had spent time together before. Nothing about that summer morning suggested that their names would soon become known across the country. But according to investigators, events leading up to the crash would become critical in understanding what happened next. During the early hours of July 31st, the three teenagers were together in Mackenzie's Toyota Camry. Surveillance footage and digital evidence later helped investigators reconstruct portions of their movements. At some point, the vehicle entered a stretch of road in Strongsville. Then something extraordinary happened. Data recovered from the vehicle indicated the car accelerated dramatically. Faster, faster, and faster still. Witnesses would later describe seeing the vehicle moving at an incredibly high rate of speed. Investigators estimated the car reached nearly 100 miles per hour. There were no signs of braking, no evidence of an attempt to avoid impact. And then, disaster. The Toyota Camry left the roadway and slammed directly into a commercial building. The force of the collision was catastrophic. Emergency responders rushed to the scene. Debris was scattered everywhere. The front of the vehicle had been almost completely destroyed. Inside were the three teenagers. Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan suffered fatal injuries. Mackenzie Shirilla survived. As investigators began examining the wreckage, what initially looked like a tragic traffic accident started raising difficult questions. Questions that would soon transform the case into a homicide investigation. Crash investigators carefully analyzed every piece of available evidence. They studied surveillance footage, examined vehicle data, reconstructed the crash second by second, and what they found troubled them. According to prosecutors, there were no mechanical failures, no evidence that the steering malfunctioned, no indication that the brakes suddenly stopped working. Instead, investigators focused on something else: the vehicle's speed, the path it traveled, and the apparent lack of any effort to stop before impact. As the investigation continued, authorities began considering a possibility far more shocking than an accident. Prosecutors eventually argued that the crash was intentional. According to their theory, Mackenzie Shirilla deliberately accelerated the vehicle and drove it into the building. They pointed to the speed of the car, the absence of braking, and evidence presented during the investigation. Prosecutors described the crash as a deliberate act that resulted in the deaths of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. The allegations stunned the public because, if true, the case was no longer about reckless driving. It was about murder. News coverage intensified. Social media exploded with debate, and people across the country began asking the same question: what really happened inside that car? The defense strongly rejected the prosecution's interpretation. Defense attorneys argued that the crash was a tragic accident. They challenged aspects of the prosecution's theory and questioned whether intent could truly be proven. According to the defense, the evidence did not establish beyond doubt that Mackenzie intended to kill anyone. They argued that a devastating crash does not automatically prove a deliberate act. Throughout the proceedings, the defense maintained that the prosecution was drawing conclusions that went beyond the available evidence. The courtroom battle became increasingly intense. Every piece of evidence was scrutinized. Every argument was challenged, and public interest continued to grow. As the trial unfolded, both sides presented their cases. Prosecutors emphasized the speed of the vehicle and the circumstances surrounding the collision. They argued that the evidence pointed toward intention rather than accident. The defense urged the court to view the crash as a tragedy rather than a planned act. Witnesses testified. Experts analyzed crash data. Investigators explained their findings, and families listened as painful details were discussed in court. The case drew national attention because it forced people to confront a difficult question: how can investigators determine what was happening inside someone's mind moments before a crash? It was a question with enormous consequences. After hearing the evidence, the court reached its decision. Mackenzie Shirilla was found guilty in connection with the deaths of Dominic Russo and Davion Flanagan. The ruling generated immediate reactions. Some people believed justice had been served. Others questioned whether intent had truly been proven. Supporters and critics debated the outcome across social media, news programs, and online forums. Even after the verdict, the controversy surrounding the case continued, because for many observers, the central question remained emotionally difficult to answer. Years after the crash, people still discuss the case. Some see it as a clear example of intentional violence. Others continue to view it as a tragic accident interpreted through the lens of hindsight. The debate reflects a larger challenge within the justice system. Determining what happened is difficult. Determining what someone intended can be even harder. And in cases like this, where only one person survives, many questions may never be answered with complete certainty. On a summer morning in Ohio, a car crashed into a building at nearly 100 miles per hour. 2 young men lost their lives. 1 young woman survived. What followed was a criminal case that captured national attention and divided public opinion. The story of Mackenzie Shirilla remains one of the most debated cases in recent American history. Was it a tragic accident, or was it something far more deliberate? The court reached its conclusion, but for many people, the discussion continues, and that is what makes this case so unforgettable. For more and interesting true crime stories, don't forget to click on the subscription button.